Speaker is Jonathan Clark. He's going to tell us a bit about NCF, and I'll let him
Thank you. Hi everyone. My name is Jonathan Clark. I want to tell you about this framework we created called NCF. It's to do with CF Engine. So just to get started, quick question. Who here has heard of CF Engine? Just put your hands up for me. It's pretty good. I can feel more. But who here has tested CF Engine? It's actually given it a try. Okay, less. Who here still uses CF Engine? Okay. Not everyone. Right. So, maybe I can change your mind about that. Let me start by introducing myself. I work at a company called Nation that I co-founded in 2009. Paris, we basically work around config management. I was originally a sysadmin, did lots of infrastructure-y things. Now I kind of run a company, so I don't have as much time to be a sysadmin as I would like, probably. But running a company is fun too. I use various free software. Rudder is a tool that we created, so I presented it here at FOSDEM in previous years. CF Engine, which you've heard of, like most of you anyway. And OpenLab, that was another life. I also help organize some events occasionally. Recent DevOps days in Paris, Paris DevOps group, and LDAP Farm, which is, like I said, another life, but also pretty interesting. So this presentation is actually about cakes. That might come as a surprise in the config management room at FOSDEM, but hopefully you'll get the link pretty soon. So for those of you who are not familiar about making cakes, the way you do it is you need ingredients. Apparently, I'm told that you need eggs, flour, butter, and sugar, and other stuff if you want to do it better. You also need recipes. So you need a recipe book, or you need your grandmother or your grandfather or some parents in general to pass down recipes to you, your friends, to share them with people who know how to do it. Okay, so let's put the cakes aside for a second and say who is we? Who is the we that created NCF? It's a bunch of CF Engine consultants, some guys from my company Nation, some guys that we've worked with from another company in Canada called Linux. Easy name for foreigners. We've been working around CF Engine for more than 4 years now, since version 3 came around. We've been in companies that are tiny, we've been in big companies, we've been in huge companies. A big difference, because one of the companies where we've worked is actually 120 sysadmins hacking into CF Engine every day. So that's what I call a huge company. And then there's the normal, regular, large ones. We just have 10 or so people. And we've seen various uses for it, applying security policies, provisioning new machines, having them configured automatically, disaster recovery, that kind of thing. And every single time, every customer, every person we talk to, we got the same feedback. 2 pieces of feedback. Number 1, CF Engine rocks. Wow, CF Engine is really powerful, it's really small, it's lightweight, it's written in C, it uses like 5 or 8 megabytes of RAM. It's so cool, so fast, really quick, awesome. It runs on pretty much every platform you've ever heard of. I had it running on my Android phone, it runs on old AIX, HPUX servers, all that kind of thing. Linux, BSD, I should probably mention them, Windows as well. It's an agent-based approach. You don't need to connect over the network to get CF Engine to do stuff. It's there, it's sitting there as a daemon or an agent that runs. It's local, it's powerful. And because it's lightweight, it runs every 5 minutes, 24, so you can get things done quickly. It's resilient to errors, no network, it's fine, it continues. I know some submarines in the world have CF Engine on board to get it running. The submarine goes out under the waters for 9 months, comes back. Oh, hey, CF Engine's still running, no problem. It's pretty cool. And it's open source. You look at that, you think, yeah, let's do CF Engine, right? This is awesome, cool. Then we get feedback number 2. CF Engine is hard. Yeah. Maybe some of you who've tested it have experienced that. Maybe some of you who haven't tested it have heard that. There's nothing new under the sun, I don't think. 4 key points that I would point out. There's a steep learning curve. There is for most of these tools. You're learning a new syntax to do new things, but CF Engine's syntax is kind of weird. It's not procedural, it doesn't follow the flow you write it in. When you use CF Engine with policy you've just written, you don't actually see any feedback necessarily about what's happening. It doesn't tell you, yeah, I tried this and it didn't work, or I tried this and it's fine. It's quite hard to get that information. You can build that, but. And like all software, maybe more open source software than other software, there's bugs, and the developers, great guys that they are, prioritize bugs based on whether there's a workaround or there's not a workaround. If there's a workaround, it gets lower priority, which means that sometimes you have a way to work around the bug, but how do you do that every single time in the code you write, the code being CF Engine promises? It's pretty hard. You have to go through everything. Sometimes you forget. There's a team of people writing it. You forget. And basically, at the end of the day, it's too much to do it yourself. You get CF Engine, it's a very powerful agent, but you have to write a lot of things to get it working. You have to build a lot of things. You can compare in this blog post that I linked here to flour, eggs, milk, and butter. So if you see where I'm going with the whole cake analogy thing, that CF Engine would be the ingredients on this basis. So what this feedback is telling us really is that learning to bake your own cakes is pretty frustrating when you don't have a recipe. You can put the ingredients in a bowl, you mix them together, you put them in the oven, and you get something like this. It's okay, it kind of tastes a cake, you hope, but it's not really like the solid foundation you wanted to build your company or your IT services. So, we asked a simple question: can we fix this? We've worked with lots of different customers, like I said, and for every one of these customers, we found a lot of workarounds. We convinced them, we implemented methods, tools, scripts, whatever, to work around these things. We thought, yeah, of course we can fix this. We've done it N times. We can do it once and for all. We can make an open source project that includes most of these things. We can include some best practices. We can include some clever bug workarounds, that kind of thing. So we accepted the challenge, and this is how NCF was born. We actually built NCF as a team of consultants that we were, and friends kind of thing. But also with a lot of pushing from patient customers, enthusiastic customers who really wanted this to work in the way it did. They may or may not have known at the time it was creating NCF. Lots of these ideas came from chatting with them and saying, oh, this should be easier. Those guys I can't name for privacy, contract, legal, nonsense reasons. But anyway, they are also part of the guys that made this. So how did we do it? What have we done? We looked at each of the downfalls and said, so what can we fix? There's too much do it yourself in CF Engine. So what we've done with NCF is provide a structured layout to start with. It's very simple. It's just a git checkout or a tarball to download. It's got some nice directories in. You can get a bit of guidance as to where to put your stuff. This is stuff we've learned over the years. There's good ways and bad ways. Some of them work for a bit and break. Some of them work forever. And maybe in 10 years I'll be proven wrong. But so far, it's a good layout. And what we've done, which is very different from what CF Engine provides now, is there's lots of reusable methods in there. A method in CF Engine is actually a bundle, you call it using methods promise. It does something, it does one thing, but it does it well. Kind of like command line tools in Unix. So we'd have a method, for example, that installs a package, and it does that well. It's got all the bug workarounds built in. To avoid the steep learning curve, what we tried to do is say, okay, there's a lot of weird syntax in CF Engine. Let's put that weird syntax where the CF Engine experts can read it, and hack it, and change it, and optimize it. But let's put everyday user in front of a much simpler syntax. So what we've done is actually pure CF Engine. There's no other languages in there. It's haven't invented anything new in terms of language. But the syntax you use for everyday policies is just a subset of standard CF Engine syntax. You can actually use one promise type. For those who know CF Engine, there's like 10 or 14 promise types. You can just use one. Use the methods promise type. What about bugs? Well, since we have these generic methods that we can call and reuse all the time, it's very simple. There's a bug workaround, you put it in a generic method, it's done, sorted, it's dry, don't repeat yourself. You've got it there, you've got it once, every time you use that bundle you have the bug fixed. Next version of CF Engine, the bug is properly fixed in the code, you remove your workaround, easy. And we've also kind of, in your own dog food, always preaching, do testing, automatic testing. Yeah, we've got automatic tests for all these bugs, all these things. How should the component work? Test it, see what comes out. If it comes out, it's fine. As soon as something breaks, as soon as the bug workaround no longer works around the bug, we'll know. And last but not least, the lack of feedback. because we have, once again, all these generic methods, we can build in feedback to them. Every time you run through a package install or a file copy bundle, it can print out a line saying, hey, I checked this, but there's nothing to do, or hey, I repaired this because it was wrong. And of course, the feedback format is configurable. You don't always want your logs full of, I checked this, nothing happened, I checked this, nothing happened, because that gets boring pretty quickly. And if you're debugging, it can be nice to turn it on. So basically, what we're saying with NCF is screw baking. We don't want to go baking or learn to bake. Let's just go and buy some cakes. These ones look pretty good, right? I've actually got to tell you, when I was doing these slides yesterday, I ended up at the end of it, I was like, I really need to eat some cake. So bad. So NCF. What is NCF? NCF is a framework. It is not a config management tool. The config management tool underneath there is CF Engine. It's a framework that runs in pure CF Engine code. There is no other code in there. And it helps you structure your CF Engine policy by providing these reusable single-purpose components, which are calling methods. They're really the body of NCF. And the whole thing, of course, is open source, otherwise I wouldn't be talking about it at FOSDEM. Check it out. And I just lied. It's not actually completely pure CF Engine. There's also some Python tooling on the side. You don't need to use that. You don't need that on your servers. Just as a development aid, it can be useful. So there's a couple of Python scripts. Since an example is worth 1,000 words, or so I'm told, here's an example. I don't know if you guys can read that. Might be a bit small from the back, but basically this is a bit of CF Engine code, pure CF Engine code, using NCF that installs the NTP package, copies a config file. If the config file was changed, it restarts NTP, so it rereads its config file. And if whatever happens, it checks that the NTP service is running. So there's 4 lines of code. I hope they're kind of readable. There's a lot of light on the board. Basically, 4 actions, and there's 5 lines of code to do this. The equivalent without NCF in pure CF Engine would look something like this. You've got one promise for each of those 4 actions. You've got some variables at the top. There's all sorts of attributes here that I've been doing CF Engine for 4 years. I still have to read the reference manual every time to figure out what attributes I'm actually supposed to use. And this is even a simplistic example. There's actually no feedback. Nothing comes out. When you put this into CF Engine, you run it, it'll just, maybe you'll get a warning message or two, but it won't tell you what CF Engine is actually doing. So, long version, short version. NCF, no NCF. And I told you there's automatic feedback. When you run this through NCF, you get something like this on your console. This is with debug logging enabled, debug for NCF, not CF Engine debug, because that's just crazy. Basically, you get 1 line for each of those promises we saw earlier. So the top one is saying the promise was kept, the package NTP is already installed, we don't need to change anything. Cool. Second 2 lines, well, lines 2 and 3 are saying the promise was repaired, something changed, so we actually edited the config file, it was not up to date, and therefore we restarted NTP. And then the final promise, checked that NTP was running, it was running, fortunately, since we just restarted it. Simple. So how does this actually work? Well, for those of you who know CF Engine, it's basically bundles with method calls to call the bundles. For those of you who don't, bundles in CF Engine are a way of containing a set of promises. I guess they're equivalent of a module in Puppet or a recipe in Chef, roughly. And you can pass parameters into this. That's what we've done. We've created a lot of bundles in CF Engine that you can use. So what we did in this example is we have an NTP bundle that's called out to 4 sub-bundles. I only put 3 on the slide, but there's 4. And they all, in turn, call out to another bundle at the bottom, which is called logger, which, as you would expect, sends these log lines, which is it's pretty simple, but it's pretty powerful in the end. As you can see, there's several different layers here. We've actually built the whole framework in a layered approach from top to bottom. Because the customers we've worked with, usually the guy at the top, or the guys at the top, they don't really care that the Apache.com file or the virtual host or whatever is not working. What they care about is their corporate website is okay. So we've kind of built this down from the services, corporate website level, down to techniques. How do I do stuff? do stuff being, for example, set up my Apache server, put my baseline on the system, like Remy was saying earlier. We've included this IT ops knowledge level, which is maybe a poor name, but hopefully it gets the point across. The IT ops knowledge includes stuff like, what is the package name for Apache on your current OS? And you can just call out to a variable, and it'll tell you it's HTTPD, it's Apache 2, or whatever OSs have decided to call that nowadays. The idea is to build up all of that stuff as possible, with much information. And then we come to really the core, which is the generic methods. All of these unit tasks do one thing, but do it well. And then underneath there, there's some libraries and framework stuff. The core principles we've tried to follow are basically avoiding all the nightmares that we've got into otherwise. So, not repeating code, any even like pattern code should not be repeated. So we've followed the dry principle, don't repeat yourself. Kits as well, I mean that's a simple one, right? Keep it simple. The idea being that users would be able to write configuration management policy without being a CF engine expert. That was one of the prime use cases actually with the companies I was working for when we first came up with this idea. Was a web hosting, a web company web service. They had a big team of sysadmins that dealt with the basic infrastructure. And they had whole loads of developer teams. Each team developed one application or one part of an application. And the way they communicated was the development team would provide the code to the ops team. And it would also provide config management files to how to install the application, how to upload it. You go from version 2 to 3, you need to change the dependencies to read in the database. And they were tearing their hair out trying to write CF engine code. So the point was with this framework, they can write their intentions pretty simply and shallow. And you see all these generic methods they keep talking about. One of the goals here is that the generic method, there's only one, there can only be one. There's not a good way and a bad way of doing it. It's not like a library or a forge of modules. We've all seen forges of modules and all projects, there's Apache 1, Apache 2, Apache 3, Apache 4, Apache 5, Apache 6, MyWeb, and so on. And it's just crazy. So the point is here with these generic methods, because they do one thing, you can already improvise. Creating a file is creating a file. Restarting a service is restarting a service. But the restarting a service can be implemented in several ways. Upstart, initd, what are other crazy things that people are now using. Anyway, so the point is that creating a new generic method is an objective choice and a subjective choice. It's extensible all over the place. This is a quick list of some of the generic methods that are available already. There's huge numbers of them because we've tried to keep it simple. So if you look at the package ones we've gone through, package install version, compare. They all do the same thing. They actually all call the same code in the end, but just you can call a simpler version to get a simpler code to write. All this is documented online. Each bundle has this kind of doc. This is just a screenshot I took of the website last night. Explains what it does, what parameters it takes. And each of these bundles provides a return, like feedback information as well. So it defines a class. Class in CF Engine is a way of sharing information. It's basically like a boolean, it's like a tag that's set or not set. And each of these bundles will set tags saying whether it performed well or didn't perform well. Which is why in my example earlier we had copy the NTB file and then restart NTB if the config file changed. That was one of those result classes. So, I'm running out of time, but I just wanted to share a few words about the status of this project. It's a young project. It started, I think officially the first commit in the repository was like October. It's young, but it's pretty robust because we've built this time and time again for different customers over the past, I'd say 2-3 years. So it's not new to us. It's stuff we've done before. It obviously needs more generic methods. We're all on them at the moment, there's like, I don't know, 30 or 40, but we could do with a lot more. Something to create users would be nice, for example. But it's being used by quite a few different people. There's lots of testing going into it, lots of new generic methods here. I included the OLO statistics. OLO is an online tool that analyzes your code and sees what it does. It's pretty objective again about what you do. And that, according to them, we're a very young product. We have a code base with a very short history. We have a large development team, which I thought was, wow, that's pretty cool. Something that we just started. And we have very well commented users. Not me, it's Dennis. So, hopefully I've explained roughly what that was. Lost the cake metaphor there somewhere, but hopefully you understand that NCF is a recipe book that goes with the flour and eggs NCF. Do we have any questions? Yes. They're two independent projects at the moment, but Rudder can actually read in code created by NCF to display it in the web interface automatically. Yeah. My recommendation would be to jump straight into NCF. As a user who's going to write config policy, if you're the config management expert in your company, probably better to learn CF Engine first, so you can debug it and fix it and add methods in. Basically, if you remember the different layers I was showing earlier, I'd say the bottom 3 layers, you need to know CF Engine to play with them, to hack them, that's the point. And the layers above can be exposed to non-CF Engine users. You can basically look at the docs, copy and paste from examples, and figure out how to do it.
I'm going to be devil's advocate a little bit here. I looked at your generic methods and how you're describing them, and then you think of other resources. It does look a lot like implementing other resources in CFN. And I'm thinking if you took the time to do this, there's a reason why you wouldn't switch to Buffett. What is it?
Why I wouldn't switch to Buffett?
I mean, you basically re-implemented something that's based on one of the features.
Yeah.
It's a good thing. But if you did that, then you want to see it.
So this would be the CF Engine Rock slide I had earlier, a really lightweight footprint, the multi-OS support, what else was on that slide? All of the great things. Like really, to me it's the lightweight, the open source, probably the chair for open source as well of course, but and the performance, the multiple OS. That's really the reason. Yeah, good question. I try, I do. I've fixed loads of bugs in CF Engine. Unfortunately, my job is not fixing bugs in CF Engine. It's often a lot shorter to write a workaround in CF Engine policy than it is to go and hack into lines of C code. And yeah, it takes time and it's complex.
Well, like we were streaming,
yeah, I would say like 10 at the moment, like 5 to 10 kind of, if you're using some weird OSs like SUSE Linux Enterprise Server 10, the default package methods don't work. They use this weird thing called bug, which is a completely broken package manager. So we've fixed that, basically patched that to use Zipper, which is another package manager, which is kind of weird but works better. That kind of thing. And copying files, for example, sometimes CF Engine behaves a bit weirdly. You've got to just add a few extra checks.
so we can also work with the
it costs some, of course. I mean, the more layers you're going through, you've got to have some. We've looked at the impact, and it's really lightweight. Going through layers and bundles in CF Engine is very fast. There's lots of other things in CF Engine that are a lot slower really. So we've seen that running pretty much the same promises with or without, you're going to go from execution time that's like 3 seconds to like 3.5 seconds. I think it's acceptable.
Yeah, I'm looking at that right now.
Which slide do you want to see there? So this is the with NCF. Can you see that better? That's the one with NCF, so just basically your 5 lines. These are 1, 2, 3, 4 calls out to generic methods. And this line here is a if statement, basically. So you only do this one if this weird class here has been defined by JavaScript. It's the file from template, the name of the destination file, and repaired. Repaired is a term that means, I checked it was not. And the after is this long thing. I'll leave that and answer another question. So you can read it. Yeah. Yeah. I've myself personally been using 3.0, 3.1, 3.2, 3.3, 3.4, 3.5, and 3.6. But this framework, I think, no longer supports 3.4. I think we removed something to support there. And I tested it yesterday on 3.6, as the first beta version came out, and it works fine.
One more question?
I'm sorry, I can't quite hear you. There's no specific cloud methods in there now. I have been using CF Engine and a similar framework to this in cloud instances though, but just managing them like, well, in any other server basically. Nothing specific for now.
All right, thank you, Jonathan.